As a business owner, you have to do that. You have to provide the opportunity for your customers, your employees, to be able to have a puzzle and solve that puzzle themselves. If you as a business owner just turns around and says, I want you to do it this way, I want you to go in that room and you go into the room, there's a man there, he's got a sword, he attacks you. That's Dungeons and Dragons. But it's very boring. You go, if you go, you enter the room, there's a man stood in the middle of the room. What do you want to do? Well, how do we find out whether he's good or bad? What's he holding? Oh, well, he's holding a sword. Okay, well, that's interesting. What kind of sword? You're now getting them involved in the creative process. If you say, oh, all of a sudden he takes a step forward, then they're going, okay, well, what do I do now? How am I? And you're engaging them, and they're interested in that. From a business perspective, as a leader, as a manager, as an owner of the business, so many times I go into businesses and the owner says, I want this to be, so, we need to increase sales. And the way we're going to increase sales is by doing A, B, and C. And they haven't spoken to anyone. They've not allowed anyone in that business to get hold of it, to creatively think about it, to understand what the problem is, and to solve that problem themselves, and to be nurtured and guided and understood so that they feel like they have a real understanding and a real control of what that situation is. So when they do have to solve that problem, it's their idea with their thoughts and their plans, guided by leadership, melded with other ideas from the department, inside the department and outside the department. And a lot of creative thinking has gone within that. Just tell people how to do. You eliminate that creativity. And it makes the system and the business and the Dungeons and Dragons just more boring. And if it's more boring, people are less likely to want to actually participate and do it and do a good job because they haven't got that passion. And what you want to do as a leader is create that passion. And the way you do that is by allowing them a stake, a control, a creativity for that reason and for inside that business decision. And once you have that, they will work so much harder for you. Learn from failure. So you make a silly mistake and the guy attacks you and then he runs off. And that was a failure because you wanted to capture him. That's actually narratively good. If you watch a Spider-Man film, Spider-Man turns up, he thwips around, he defeats the bad guy and he leaves. That sounds like quite a boring film. Whereas if Spider-Man has to learn how to be Spider-Man and then he goes up against a guy and he gets his butt kicked and then he has to come back and then he has to find a friend who will help him or learn from Uncle Ben a lesson from beyond the grave, and then he comes back to the same guy and beats him. That's a really good story and is a success of a film and a success of a narrative. But actually, there's a lot of failure in there. And that failure makes things better because you learn from failure much more than you learn from success. And so your job as a business consultant, your job as a business owner, your job as a party leader in Dungeons and Dragons is to create a culture where that failure is managed and understood, but is also not seen as the end of the world, not seen as something that is catastrophic and fireable and probation ending. That if they are nurtured correctly, if they're given the proper kind of training and they understand that certain levels of failure are positive, and as long as you're doing things for the right reason, you're collaborating and you're working hard and you still do all that and you fail, that's fine. And then when you do fail, iterate. What do we learn? Well, we learn actually the only time we really kind of knocked the dragon off balance was when we used fire. Okay, well, the dragon might be afraid of fire. We've learned something here. Next time we go in, let's go back in and let's use more fire this time. Let's see what happens. We do a better job. We still don't beat him. But while we're there, we might learn another piece of information that says, there's a particular sword we need to go away, get, because this is a magical sword, come back, defeat the dragon with the sword, with the flaming sword of whatever,